The woman snapped her fingers at me across my own workbench, the way you would call a dog, and told me to go and fetch the man in charge. I am the man in charge. I have been the man in charge of that shop for 30 years, but I was holding a broom at that moment, and I had sawdust in my hair and glue on my apron, and a broom in the hands of an old man is, to a certain kind of person, the whole of what they need to know about you. She had already decided who I was before I opened my mouth, the way she decided most things, quickly and from a great height. And so I did the thing I usually do when somebody hands me that much information about themselves for free. I kept sweeping, and I let her keep talking, and I learned everything I needed to know. By the end of that month, the one thing in the world that woman had come to my shop to buy, the thing she could not have imagined being told no about, would be gone forever, given to someone else, and no amount of her husband's money would ever bring it back. This is the story of a woman who learned, too late, that there are still a few things in this world that are not for sale, and that the price of them is the one currency she had never thought to carry. My name is Vince Marchetti. I am 55 years old, and I build guitars. I should say that more carefully, because a lot of people build guitars. I build a particular kind, by hand, alone, a few a year, in a small shop in the mountains above Durango, Colorado. And through a long accident of skill and stubbornness and time, the instruments that come out of that shop have become, in the small and serious world of people who care about such things, something close to legendary. Musicians wait years for one. Collectors offer sums for the old ones that embarrass me to hear. There is a particular sound a Marchetti makes, a warmth, people say, though I have never liked that word for it, and they will pay anything to own it. What they will not get from me, no matter what they pay, is the right to be the kind of person I do not want holding one of my guitars. That has never been for sale. And the woman snapping her fingers at me was about to find out why. Anyone who has ever been treated as furniture by a person who decided their work made them lesser will recognize the particular sting of what happened in my shop that day. Stay to the end of it. The ending is the whole point, and it is gentler and harder than you are bracing for. To her, the broom settled the question of me before I ever opened my mouth. It did not cross her mind, in the whole hour she spent in my shop, that the hands on that broom were the same hands that had signed the headstock of every guitar on the wall she had come to carry off. Let me back up to how she came to be standing there, because it is the hinge the whole thing turns on. That winter, I had made a decision, and let it be known, quietly, in the way such things travel, that I was going to build one last guitar. I am 55, which is not old, but my hands have started to tell me things, small things, the kind a man who works with his hands learns to listen to, and I knew that the work I do at the level I demand of myself has a number of years left in it that is smaller than the number behind me. So I decided that I would build a final instrument, my best, the summation of everything 30 years had taught me. And then I would stop building the great ones and spend my remaining good years teaching and repairing and being content. I did not announce it for attention. I announced it because the people who love this work deserved to know, and because I needed it to be true out loud before I could begin. And I said one more thing, which is the thing that brought the wolves. I said that the last guitar would be made from the wood. I have to tell you about the wood, because the wood is the whole of who I am. And it is the reason none of what happened could have gone any other way. When I was 19 years old, I was a poor kid with restless hands and no future anyone could see. And I wandered into the shop of an old luthier named Salvatore, looking for work sweeping floors, which is a circle this story closes that I did not plan and only now notice. Sal did not need a sweeper. He took me on anyway because, he told me years later, he had watched me pick up a half-finished guitar off his bench and hold it the way you hold a thing you love rather than a thing you want. And he had decided in that one motion that I was worth teaching. He taught me everything, He gave me the only life I have ever wanted. And when he was dying, an old man with nothing much to leave, he gave me the one thing he had been saving his whole career. A single board of Adirondack spruce, perfectly quarter-sawn, that had been air-drying in his rafters for longer than I had been alive. Wood so fine and so old, you cannot buy its like at any price, because the trees it came from are gone. He pressed it into my hands the way you give somebody something holy, and he told me the rule he had lived his whole life by, the one I have lived by since. He said, "Vincenzo, we do not build for the ones who can pay. Anybody can take money. We build for the ones who can hear." Then he closed my hands around that board, and a week later he was gone. And I have kept that wood in my rafters for 30 years, waiting, because you do not use the holiest thing you own until you know exactly what it is for. I have honored Sal's rule every day of the 30 years since, and it has cost me a great deal of money and bought me a life I would not trade for any of it. I have turned down men who could have made me rich, because the way they talked about my instruments told me they wanted a trophy and not a voice. I have sold guitars for less than I was offered, to musicians who could barely scrape the money together, because I watched their hands and knew the thing would be played until it wore through, instead of hung on a wall under a light. People in my trade think I am either a saint or a fool, and I am neither one. I am simply a man who was handed a whole life by an old luthier who chose him for the right reason, and who decided long ago that the only honest way to repay a gift like that is to keep giving it away the same way it came to me. The board in my rafters was the last and largest piece of that debt, and I had spent 30 years refusing to spend it on anyone who walked through my door talking about value, when what they meant was price. When I decided on the last guitar, I knew it would be Sal's wood, the board he saved his whole life, in the hands he trained, made into the best thing those hands would ever do. And the only question left was the one Sal had answered for me 30 years before, which is who it would be for, because I was never, not for 1 second, going to sell it. The last guitar from Sal's wood was going to be given, freely, to the one person who could truly hear it. The way Sal gave my whole life to a floor sweeper because of how the boy held a guitar. That was always the plan. Money was never going to enter into it. The trouble was that the world heard Last Guitar and a famous name, and the world does not believe that anything is unbuyable. So they came. Collectors flew in. A famous musician's manager called 4 times. Offers arrived. Absurd ones. Sums that could have bought my shop 10 times over. All of them assuming the only real question was the number. Because to the people making them, the number is the only question there has ever been about anything. I turned them all down, politely. And most of them went away confused, the way a certain kind of wealthy person is genuinely confused by the word no, as if it were a foreign coin you had tried to pay them with. I should say that I do not hold the offers themselves against anyone. Money is just how a certain kind of person says, "I want this badly." And wanting my work badly is no sin. What told me about each of them was never the number, but the sentence wrapped around it. One collector, a decent man, sent me a letter that never mentioned a sum at all, only described the first time a particular recording had made him pull his car to the shoulder of a road and weep. And I nearly built him one for that alone, and would have if the wood had been ordinary wood. Another had an assistant email me a figure with no greeting and no signature, the way you would prompt a vending machine that was slow to drop your snack. You learn everything from the wrapper. By the time Camille Dorsey's car came up my mountain, I had already turned away a dozen fortunes, and I had started to worry a little. That the right person might not find their way to my door before my own pride in the work tempted me to bend the one standard Sal ever gave me. I need not have worried. The right person was, at that very moment, waiting tables in the valley below me, saving tip money in a jar to fix a dead man's guitar. Camille Dorsey did not go away. Camille Dorsey came in person. She was the wife of a man whose money came from moving other people's money around. And she had made a project, I would learn, of acquiring beautiful and difficult things. The way some people fill a hole inside themselves with objects, because the objects, at least, can be possessed in a way that the missing thing never can. She arrived at my shop on a Tuesday, in a car that cost more than my house, with sunglasses she did not remove indoors, and a way of moving through a room as though it had been cleared for her arrival. And she found, instead of the great Marchetti she had come to bargain with, an old man with a broom. And she did exactly what people like her do, which is to file me instantly under help and stop seeing me at all. She snapped her fingers. She told me to fetch the man in charge, and when I set down my broom and told her, mildly, that I was Marchetti, she did the thing I have never gotten used to in all my years, despite seeing it 100 times. She did not believe me. And then, when she understood I was telling the truth, she was not embarrassed. She simply recalibrated, instantly, from treating me as a servant to treating me as a vendor, which in her internal accounting was the same low category with a slightly higher price tag. There was no apology for the finger snap. It had not registered as a thing requiring one. You do not apologize to the furniture for sitting on it. I want to be honest about the one moment my manners nearly left me. And it was not the snap of her fingers, and it was not her disbelief. It was the way she touched the guitars. She walked my wall, the instruments I had given years of my life to, and she took them down without asking, by the necks, carelessly, the way you would pull a can off a grocery shelf. And she turned them over, looking not at the wood, or the grain, or the soul of the thing, but at the label, the way a person reads a price tag. And she set them back crooked. She did not hear a single one of them. She never asked to. In an hour in a room full of the best work I will ever do, surrounded by instruments that men and women have wept to play, she did not once ask to hear a note. The music was not the point. The music had never been the point. The point was having the thing other people could not have. And somewhere in watching her handle 40 years of Sal's wisdom and my labor like inventory, I came very near to telling her to put her sunglasses back on and get out of my shop. I did not, because I had already understood something about Camille Dorsey that took the anger and turned it into something closer to a tired kind of pity. And it is the thing I most want you to see, because it is the truest part of her. She was not happy. Under the money and the contempt and the sunglasses worn indoors, Camille Dorsey was one of the emptiest people I have ever stood in a room with. And I have learned, over a long life of watching people in the presence of beautiful things, that you can always tell the ones who are trying to buy their way out of a hole, because they handle the beautiful thing as though it might finally be the one that fixes them. And then they cannot hear it. And the not hearing is the whole tragedy. She took a phone call in the middle of my shop, turning her back on a wall of instruments to talk numbers with someone about something that had nothing to do with music. And she did not register the guitars behind her as anything but merchandise she had not yet acquired. I thought about all the rooms she must move through like that, full of beautiful things she had bought and could not hear, could not taste, could not feel, because the part of a person that does the hearing and the tasting and the feeling is not a part anyone has ever sold. And hers had gone quiet so long ago, she had forgotten she once had one. There are worse poverties than an empty wallet. And I was standing across my own workbench from one of them. She had everything, and she was starving. And she had driven up my mountain, certain that my last guitar was the thing that would finally feed her. When the plain and merciless truth was that she could have owned every instrument I ever made and never heard a single note of one of them. Because the hunger she carried was not a hunger any object has filled in the whole history of people trying. She did not want my guitar because she loved music. I doubt she had heard, truly heard, a piece of music in 20 years. She wanted it because owning the unbuyable thing was the only proof of her own worth she had left. And her husband did not look up from his phone anymore. And the guitar was going to be the thing that finally made him look. None of that excused how she treated me, or what she did next. But it meant that when the no came, it was going to take from her something far larger than a guitar. And I knew it even then. And it gave me no pleasure at all. She named a number. It was obscene. She named it the way you play a winning card. Watching my face for the moment, the size of it rearranged me. And when my face did not change, she named a larger one. Because in her experience, a man who did not move at the first number was simply holding out for the second. I let her get all the way to the end of her bidding, to the final, staggering figure, the one she clearly believed no human being could refuse. And then I told her, gently, the truth that her entire life had failed to prepare her for. I told her the guitar was not for sale. Not for that. Not for 10 times that. That it had never been for sale, to anyone, for any sum, and that the only thing it would ever cost was a thing she did not appear to have brought with her. She thought I was negotiating. Of course she did. In her world, not for sale is simply the opening position of a more sophisticated kind of greed. And she smiled a thin smile and asked me what I really wanted, in a tone that suggested we were finally being honest with each other. And I realized she genuinely could not conceive of the answer, that there was no number left in her to reach for the truth with. And so I stopped trying to explain it. Because some things cannot be explained to a person, they can only happen to them. I told her the guitar would go to whoever was meant to have it, and that she would know, when she heard who, that it had been decided fairly. And I picked my broom back up, which I believe insulted her more than anything I could have said. And I went back to sweeping my floor. And after a while she left, certain, I am sure, that she would simply have her husband's people handle it, the way her husband's people handled everything that told her no. Her husband's people did call. They called my shop, and they called the lawyer I keep on a small retainer for exactly such weather. And they called, I later heard, 2 of the collectors who had been bidding to see whether the guitar might be acquired through them once I had sold it, not understanding that there would be no sale for anyone to stand downstream of. One of them, a man with a title at some fund, tried a move I had not seen before, which was to suggest, very politely, that a small shop like mine surely ran on goodwill in certain circles, and that it would be a shame if word got around that Marchetti was difficult to deal with. He meant it as leverage. He did not grasp that he had just told me, in the plainest terms a man can use, exactly what kind of person he was, and that there is no threat on this earth that works on a man who has already decided money cannot buy the thing you are threatening to take from him. I told him I had been difficult to deal with for 30 years, that it was in fact the entire secret of the work, and that he was welcome to spread the news as far as he cared to. He hung up. People who trade only in leverage are genuinely lost when they meet someone who has nothing they can take and wants nothing they can give. It is the one language they never bothered to learn, because until that moment, they had never once needed it. The person the guitar was always going to go to walked into my shop about a week later. And she did not come to buy anything, because she could not have bought a string. Her name was Etta. She was 22, and she worked days at a diner down in the valley and played for tips on weekends. And she came up the mountain to my shop, not knowing whose it was, because somebody had told her there was a man up there who could fix anything, and she had something that needed fixing. It was a guitar, a cheap one, factory-made, the finish worn through where a hand had rubbed it for decades, with a crack down the lower bout that somebody had badly repaired once already. It was, by every measure, a person like Camille would use, worthless. Etta carried it like it was made of glass and gold. It had been her father's. He had taught her to play on it. And he had died when she was 19. And the crack had happened when it fell during the hard year after. And she had been saving, a little at a time out of tip money, to have it fixed right Because she told me, not knowing she was telling the man who built the guitars on the wall behind her. It was the only thing she had left that still sounded like him. She told me about him while I turned the old guitar over in my hands. The way people tell you things when they have quietly decided you are safe. Her father had worked a sawmill and played that cheap guitar on the porch every evening of her childhood. And he had not been a great player, she said, smiling. Just a man who loved it. And he had taught her the summer she was 7 by setting her small fingers on the frets with his big ones laid over them. He wrote little songs nobody else would ever hear, about her mother and the dog and the mountains. And he had been partway through teaching her the last one when his heart stopped on an ordinary Tuesday with no warning at all. She had finished that song herself, afterward, from the half he had taught her, because she could not bear for it to be left undone, and she had never been entirely sure she had gotten the ending right. She played open mics partly, she admitted, a little embarrassed, on the chance that somewhere out there was a stranger who had heard him play it once and could tell her. I have been given a great many reasons over the years for why somebody wanted a guitar fixed. No one had ever given me that one. I have not heard a better one since. She did not look at my wall. She did not know to. She looked at me, and she talked to me like a person, the old man who could fix her father's guitar, and she asked me, shy about the cost, whether I thought it could be saved, and how much, because she only had a little but she could pay it out over time if I would let her. And then, while I was looking the old guitar over, she asked if she could play it one more time before she left it with me, in case it came back sounding different, and she sat down on my stool and she played. I have heard a great deal of music in this shop. Famous hands have played famous instruments 6 feet from where I stood. And I will tell you that this 22-year-old girl, on a cracked factory guitar that was barely holding its tune, playing something simple, she said her father wrote, made a sound I had not heard in years. Because she was not playing the guitar, she was playing her father. She was playing the only way that has ever mattered, which is as though the music were a person you loved and were trying to keep alive a little longer in the only room you had left to keep him in. She could hear. That was the whole of it. Sal would have known it in 4 notes, the way he knew it about me from how I held a guitar at 19. She could hear. And she did not know she was extraordinary. And she had carried a worthless, priceless thing up a mountain on the chance that an old man could keep her father's voice from going silent. I had to turn away and pretend to hunt for something on a shelf. Because I am an old man, and I have buried the person who gave me my life. And there are some sounds that find the exact door you keep shut and open it without asking permission. When I trusted my face again, I turned back around, and she was already apologizing for taking up my time. This girl who had just played me the truest thing I had heard in a decade. Certain she had imposed on me, and I understood, standing in my own shop, that the world arranges, every so often, for the right wood and the right hands to end up in the same small room at the same impossible hour. And that a man who has spent his whole life waiting for exactly that has no business hesitating when it finally walks through his door carrying a cracked guitar and a dead father's unfinished song. I fixed her father's guitar. I did the finest repair I have ever done on an instrument worth nothing. And I would not let her pay. And I made up something about owing the diner downhill a favor, so the refusing would not cost her any pride. And then I told her I was building one last guitar, that I had been looking a long time for the right person to hand it to, and that I had found her. She did not understand at first. Then she did, and she tried to tell me no, that she could not possibly, that I must be mistaking her for somebody who mattered, which is the thing the deserving always say. Because the people who have truly earned a thing are the last on earth to believe it. I did not give her room to refuse. Sal taught me that too. That now and then, the kindest thing you can do for a person is decide for them, before their own humility talks them out of their own life. I told her it was settled, the way Sal settled it for me at 19. and that the only work left was for her to spend the rest of her years becoming worthy of it, which I did not doubt for a moment she would. I built Sal's wood into the best guitar these hands will ever make, and I put it in the arms of a girl who plays her dead father back to life on weekends for tip money. And it is, I am as certain as I have ever been of anything, exactly where that board was always traveling, across 30 years, to land. Camille Dorsey came back, of course. They always come back. When the no finally becomes real to them, because the realness of it is the part their money has never let them feel before, and they cannot believe it. She came back about 2 weeks after Etta, and she had heard, by then, that the last Marchetti had been given away, given for nothing, to some unknown girl from a diner, and the not for sale she had taken for a bargaining position had turned out to be the simple truth, and it had broken something open in her that all the bidding never could. She was different on the second visit. She had taken the sunglasses off. She had, I think, rehearsed something on the drive up, and she stood in my shop, in the same spot where she had snapped her fingers, and she apologized. It was not a small apology, and I do not believe it was entirely a strategic one. She said she had been unforgivably rude, that she was sorry, that she had not seen me, had not really seen anyone in a long time. And she was right about that, more right than she knew. And then, because she was who she was and could not help reaching for the only tool she had ever been given, she told me she understood now, that she would do anything to make it right. And she named a new number, an even larger one, and asked if there was any way at all, even now, that she could commission something, anything, be put on a list, begin again. And this is the part I want to be careful about, because it is the whole of what I have to give you. I was not cruel to her. I want you to know that. There was no triumph in it for me, no score being settled, because I had seen, 2 weeks earlier, the empty room inside her. And there is no satisfaction to be taken from a person once you have seen that. I told her, as kindly as I have ever told anyone a hard thing, that her apology was accepted, fully and without reservation, and that I meant it. And then I told her the part that no apology could change, which is that the last guitar was already in the hands of the person it was meant for, and that it could not be unbuilt or unmade or called back, and that this was not a punishment I was choosing to keep inflicting on her. It was simply the shape of the world. Some things you only get one chance at, and the chance is not the money, it never was. It is the person you decide to be in the half second when you think no one important is watching. She had spent her chance on a snap of her fingers at a man with a broom, and the terrible, ordinary truth was that the man with the broom had been the only thing that mattered in the room the whole time, and she had been the last person able to see it. She did not argue. I watched her understand, finally, all the way down, that there was a kind of thing money could not reach, and that she had spent her whole life building a life that could only reach the other kind, and that she had just met, in a dusty shop on a mountain, the exact border of everything she had. I felt for her. I still do. She thanked me, quietly, with nothing left of the woman who had snapped her fingers, and she drove back down the mountain. And I do not know what she did with what she learned, and I hope, sincerely, that it was the beginning of something for her, and not just a wound. Because a wound that teaches you nothing is the saddest waste there is. How the rest of it rippled through the wider world, the collectors and the famous manager, and the talk among the small, serious circle of people who care about such things, is not what I carry from that winter. So I will let it go unmentioned. What I carry is a sound. It is the sound of a young woman in a diner down in the valley who now plays open mics on the finest instrument I will ever build, and who told me the first time she played it in public, she played the song her father wrote, and that for the first time since he died, she said, it sounded like he was in the room. That is what Sal's wood was for. 40 years of drying in an old man's rafters and 30 more in mine. All of it traveling toward a room I would never see, so that a girl could hear her father again. That is the only price it ever cost, and the only currency that could ever have paid it. And Camille Dorsey, with all the money in the world, simply did not have the coin. I am not going to end on the question people usually want to ask me. I want to leave you holding a different one. The next time you are tired and impatient, and there is some person in front of you whose work has made you decide they are less than you, a clerk, a server, a man with a broom, stop for 1 second and remember Camille Dorsey on a mountain, learning too late that the person you are careless with might be the one holding the only thing money cannot buy. You are always, always being measured, not by the people who can do something for you, but by how you treat the ones you have decided cannot. And the bill for that, when it comes, is paid in a currency you cannot borrow against in a hurry. Tell me in the comments about a time you saw somebody fail that test, or pass it. I read them all. And go be kind to the person holding the broom. You have absolutely no idea whose hands those are.